One finds in the modern spiritual landscape a phenomenon worthy of deep consideration, the teachings of a man named Eckhart Tolle.
The voice you hear is that of Carl Gustav Jung, founder of analytical psychology, and the phenomenon he's considering is the modern spiritual guide Eckhart Tolle.
His work, particularly his book, The Power of Now, has resonated deeply with many, offering a path to inner peace and a release from suffering. It is a curious thing, this widespread appeal, for it touches upon truths that echo through the very depths of the human psyche, truths that I, in my own explorations, have sought to illuminate. Yet, as with all profound insights, it is crucial to examine them through a discerning lens, to understand their place within the broader tapestry of human experience. Today I shall endeavor to offer a Jungian perspective on Tolle's core concepts, to see where our paths converge and where they diverge, and what this might mean for the individual's journey towards wholeness.
So you see value in his work, but believe it requires the deeper context of psychology to be fully understood. Let's begin with his most fundamental concept, the present moment.
Mr. Tolle, as I understand him, places immense emphasis on what he terms the present moment. He posits that true peace and fulfillment are found not in dwelling on the past's regrets or the future's anxieties, but in a conscious, unwavering presence in the now. This, he argues, is the gateway to our innermost essence, a state of being untainted by the incessant chatter of the mind. From my own work, I can certainly appreciate the profound significance of such a state. Indeed, the unconscious often speaks to us in the language of the eternal present, unburdened by linear time. The archetypal images, the symbols that emerge from the collective unconscious, possess a timeless quality existing beyond the fleeting moments of our conscious perception. He speaks extensively of ego identification, viewing the ego as a primary source of human suffering. For Tolle, the ego is a construct of the mind, constantly seeking validation, control, and attachment to external forms and thought patterns. It is this identification, he suggests, that creates a false sense of self, leading to endless cycles of desire and dissatisfaction.
This is where I sense your first major point of departure. You see his ego not as the center of consciousness, but as something closer to the persona.
Here, I must pause and consider. While I too recognize the potential for the ego to become inflated or to lead one astray, my understanding of the ego differs fundamentally. For me, the ego is the center of consciousness, the very seat of our personal identity. It is the organizing principle of our conscious mind, responsible for our sense of self, our thoughts, feelings, and actions. To transcend the ego entirely, as Tolle suggests, would be to risk dissolving the very structure that allows us to navigate the world, to differentiate ourselves, and to engage in the process of individuation. However, I can see how Tolle's ego identification might correspond to an over-identification with what I termed the persona, the social mask we wear, the roles we play, which, when mistaken for our true self, can indeed lead to inner disharmony. Tolle also speaks of conscious presence and inner stillness as the means to access a deeper state of being, a consciousness beyond the egoic mind. This state, he claims, brings joy, clarity, and a profound sense of peace. This resonates with the experience of accessing the self, the archetype of wholeness, which transcends the ego and integrates both conscious and unconscious aspects. The stillness he describes could be akin to the quietude necessary for the unconscious to reveal itself, for the inner voice of wisdom to be heard. It is in such moments of profound introspection that one can indeed touch upon a deeper reality, a connection to something greater than the individual ego. Finally, Tolle advocates for acceptance and surrender, suggesting that by embracing what is without resistance, we can find freedom from unnecessary suffering. This too holds a kernel of truth. Resistance to reality, to the inevitable flow of life, is indeed a source of much psychological distress. My own work on the shadow, for instance, emphasizes the necessity of accepting and integrating those disowned parts of ourselves rather than resisting or repressing them. To surrender to the totality of one's being, including its darker aspects, is a crucial step towards psychological maturity and wholeness. However, True acceptance, in my view, is not a passive resignation, but an active engagement with reality, a conscious choice to integrate all aspects of experience into the larger framework of the self.
So while the goal may seem similar, freedom through acceptance, your path involves an active confrontation and integration, particularly with what you called the shadow. This leads us to the heart of the distinction between your work and his.
Now let us delve deeper into this concept of the ego, for it is here that a significant distinction arises between my analytical psychology and Mr. Tolle's spiritual teachings. As I have stated, for me, the ego is not merely a source of suffering to be transcended. It is the indispensable center of our conscious personality. It is the ego that provides us with a sense of identity, continuity, and purpose. Without a well-developed and robust ego, the individual risks being overwhelmed by the unconscious, becoming fragmented, or losing their footing in the external world. A strong ego is not an obstacle to spiritual growth, but a necessary foundation upon which true self-realization can be built. When Tolle speaks of ego identification, I see a resonance with my concept of the persona. The persona, derived from the Latin word for an actor's mask, is the face we present to the world, the roles we adopt to navigate society. It is a necessary adaptation, allowing us to function within social structures. However, when an individual becomes excessively identified with their persona, mistaking it for their entire being, they lose touch with their authentic self and the deeper currents of the psyche. This over-identification can indeed lead to much suffering, as the individual's sense of worth becomes entirely dependent on external validation and the maintenance of a particular image. In this sense, Tolle's call to disidentify from the ego could be interpreted as a call to shed the constricting grip of an overdeveloped or falsely identified persona, allowing for a more genuine expression of the self. Furthermore, Tolle's emphasis on transcending the ego, while seemingly aimed at liberation, might inadvertently touch upon the realm of the shadow. The shadow, as I conceived it, comprises those aspects of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, undesirable, or immoral, and thus repress into the unconscious. It contains both our personal darkness and, paradoxically, undeveloped positive qualities. To truly move beyond the limitations of the ego, one must confront and integrate this shadow. Merely transcending or ignoring the ego, without first acknowledging and integrating its darker aspects, risks leaving these powerful unconscious forces unaddressed, where they can continue to exert their influence from the depths, often manifesting in destructive ways. Tolle's teachings, by encouraging a detachment from the ego's machinations, might create a space where the shadow's contents could potentially surface, but without the framework for conscious integration, this surfacing could be disorienting or even overwhelming for the unprepared individual.
This is the core of your critique, that transcendence without integration is an incomplete process. It risks leaving the shadow unexplored. So your path of individuation is not about escaping the self, but about engaging with it more fully.
Here we arrive at the crux of the matter, the path to wholeness. For me, this journey is known as individuation, a lifelong process of psychological differentiation aiming at the development of the individual personality. It is the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. This involves a conscious confrontation with the unconscious, integrating its contents, the archetypes, the shadow, the anima animus, into the conscious personality. It is a path of active engagement, of dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, leading to a richer, more comprehensive self. It is not about eradicating the ego, but about strengthening it and placing it in proper relation to the self, the greater totality of the psyche. Mr. Tolle, on the other hand, presents a path primarily focused on presence as the means to spiritual awakening. His emphasis is on continuous, unwavering attention to the present moment, a state he believes liberates one from the suffering caused by the mind's incessant activity. This is a direct, experiential approach seeking immediate access to a state of being beyond thought and emotion. It is a powerful discipline, no doubt, and one that can bring profound peace and clarity. Where do these paths converge and where do they diverge? Both, I believe, aim at a form of liberation from suffering and a deeper connection to reality. Tolle's presence can indeed open a doorway to the unconscious, allowing for moments of profound insight and a sense of interconnectedness that resonates with the experience of the collective unconscious. The stillness he advocates can be a fertile ground for the emergence of archetypal images and symbols, which are the language of the deeper psyche. In this sense, his teachings can serve as a valuable preparatory step, cultivating a state of receptivity.
But it is a preparatory step, not the entire journey.
However, the divergence lies in the subsequent steps. Tolle's path, as I perceive it, tends towards transcendence, a movement away from the ego and the mind's constructs. My path, individuation, is one of integration, a conscious assimilation of all aspects of the psyche, including the ego, the shadow, and the archetypes, into a unified whole. It is not enough to merely observe the ego or the pain body. One must understand their origins, their dynamics, and consciously work to integrate their lessons. The ego, in my view, must be strong enough to hold the tension of the opposites, to engage with the unconscious without being dissolved by it. True wholeness, I contend, requires not just presence, but also profound self-knowledge and the courageous work of integrating all that we are.
So in your final analysis, Tolle's work provides a vital key, but it is not the master key to the entire castle of the self.
So, what are we to make of Eckhart Tolle's observations from a Jungian perspective? I see in his work a profound intuition regarding the human condition and a valuable emphasis on the transformative power of present moment awareness. His teachings offer a direct and accessible route to experiencing a deeper dimension of existence, one that many in our modern, overly intellectualized world desperately seek. For this, he deserves considerable appreciation. Yet my own explorations suggest that while presence can illuminate the path, the journey to true psychological wholeness, to individuation, requires more than transcendence alone. It demands a conscious engagement with the totality of the psyche, a courageous confrontation with the shadow, and a diligent effort to integrate all the disparate elements of our being. It is a process of becoming who we truly are, not by escaping the mind, but by understanding and harmonizing its complex interplay with the unconscious. Ultimately, both paths offer invaluable insights. Perhaps the wisest approach is to embrace the stillness and presence that Tolle advocates, allowing it to open us to deeper truths, and then, with a strengthened and aware ego, to embark on the arduous yet ultimately rewarding journey of individuation, integrating all that emerges from the depths. For it is in the conscious integration of both light and shadow, of presence and psychological depth, that the human spirit finds its most complete and authentic expression. Reflect upon this and consider how these perspectives might enrich your own journey until we meet again.
Become who you truly are.